The night Alden Green passed away, the air in his room was still, too still. Buster, his loyal golden retriever, lay curled at his feet like he always did. The TV was off for once. A half-read book rested on his chest. The light from the hallway spilled gently across the floor, catching the corner of an old folded note he had tucked beneath his pillow. He had written it a week earlier. Nothing fancy, just a scrap of lined paper from the kitchen drawer, the kind of paper he always used for grocery lists, reminders, the occasional love note back when his wife was alive. But this note wasn't for the store. It was for his daughter, Mary. Don't feel guilty. I was just tired. You gave me good days. That's all I ever wanted. Mary didn't find the note until the next afternoon. She'd called him that morning. No answer. Not unusual. Alden often turned off his ringer and forgot to turn it back on. But something told her to drive over. The house was quiet when she arrived. The door was unlocked. The kettle had boiled dry. And there he was, peaceful, untouched by pain, just gone. She sat with him for a long time before calling anyone, held his hand, smoothed back his thin silver hair, and wept, not because it was sudden, but because it wasn't. Deep down, she had seen it coming. Not the death exactly, but the decline, the weariness. The way he talked less, moved slower, excused the discomfort in his chest as just indigestion more and more often. He hadn't been the same since his 70th birthday. And that wasn't just age. It was habit. A series of small, silent decisions that slowly chipped away at his health. It wasn't one thing that took him. It was many, and that's why you're here tonight. Because Mary made a decision that day sitting beside her father's still body. She would not let his story end in silence. She would learn, and she would teach. So others, maybe even you, could live better, rest better, and stay with the ones who loved them just a little longer. That's when she began to look deeper. She talked to his doctor, read every book she could find, dug into the notes he scribbled around the house. And what she discovered were 4 bedtime habits Alden kept, small things he thought were harmless, that may have quietly pushed his heart to the edge. These aren't just tips, they're warnings. And they come wrapped in love, because Mary believes, if even one life can be changed by her father's passing, then his final chapter becomes a new beginning for someone else. Maybe for you. Mary sat at her father's kitchen table the day after the funeral, holding a cup of chamomile tea, his favorite, and staring at his worn leather journal. She had found it tucked behind an old crossword book near his nightstand. At first, she hesitated to open it. It felt too personal, like a door into someone's soul. But when she did, what she read broke her heart. Another restless night. Chest tight again. Woke up at 2 a.m. Felt dizzy. Should stop eating so late, but it helps the loneliness. There it was. Quiet, nearly invisible clues that something wasn't right. Notes to himself that should have been cries for help. That's when Mary saw it clearly. Her father's bedtime. Habits weren't just innocent routines, they were signs of slow self-neglect. And one of them stood out right away. He was eating late. Every night she remembered him laughing it off when she brought it up weeks ago. I get hungry around 10, he'd said, waving her off. Just a little something to settle the stomach. But that little something was often a reheated slice of meatloaf, half a sandwich, sometimes cookies and milk. Heavy, salty, fatty foods eaten just before he lay down to sleep. At 71, Alden's digestive system wasn't what it used to be. His heart worked harder. His blood sugar spiked unpredictably. His blood pressure rose quietly in the background. Mary learned from his doctor that eating late can put enormous stress on the aging heart, especially when the body is trying to rest and repair. It became clear, this small nightly habit may have quietly pushed him closer to his final night. So, Mary made a vow. No more late-night meals. No snacks after 7. Instead, she leaned into earlier dinners filled with lighter, heart-friendly foods, soups, steamed vegetables, whole grains, and warm teas. She didn't just change her own routine, she encouraged her friends to do the same. Because every late-night craving could be a missed opportunity to let the body rest fully. Then there was the second habit. One that seemed innocent, even relaxing. Alden kept the television on long into the night. At first, Mary thought it was just noise to keep him company. After all, the house was quiet without her mother, and many seniors turned to the TV to feel less alone. But what she found surprised her. In his journal, he wrote, "Fell asleep with the remote in my hand again. Woke up to flashing lights, headache. Nightmares after that war movie. Don't know why I watched it. Can't sleep without background noise anymore." The truth hit hard. Alden wasn't resting, he was just numbing. The bright screens, the loud action films, even the flickering light of late-night news, they weren't calming him. They were stimulating his nervous system, feeding him stress just as his body was begging for peace. As she read, Mary felt a pit in her stomach. He had needed stillness, not static, and he didn't know how to find it anymore. She remembered walking into the room once and seeing him asleep in the recliner, the television blaring, a loud commercial rattling the silence. His eyes were closed, but his fingers were twitching. His brow furrowed, his breath shallow. That wasn't rest, that was survival. So Mary unplugged the TV in her own bedroom, replaced it with a soft reading lamp and a shelf of poetry and devotionals. And she slept, deeply, dreamlessly, peacefully. She hadn't felt that kind of rest in years. The body, she realized, wants quiet. It needs it. And as we age, the cost of overstimulation becomes too high to ignore. The third habit her father kept was one he never considered a danger, because it was wrapped in stillness, a kind of passive neglect. He didn't move. Not in the evening, not before bed, and sometimes barely at all during the day. Mary had tried to get him to stretch, to walk a little, to join the local senior center's chair yoga classes. But he always said the same thing. "I'm too tired, my legs feel heavy, I just want to sit." And so he did, every night for hours, in the same worn chair, his circulation slowing, muscles weakening, and blood pooling quietly in his legs. Mary learned later that poor circulation is one of the hidden dangers of inactivity in older adults. It can lead to dizziness, leg cramps, high blood pressure, even blood clots. He thought he was resting, but he was slowly fading. So she made another vow, one more powerful than the rest. She would move, even when it hurt, even when she was tired. She began taking short evening walks. Just 10 minutes, sometimes barefoot in the grass, sometimes through her hallway, humming softly to herself. She stretched her arms toward the ceiling, rotated her ankles before bed, rolled her shoulders. She even started dancing again, softly, gently, to her favorite records, because movement isn't just about exercise, it's about life. She wanted her blood to remember she was still living, that she still wanted to. And then, there was the final habit, the one that stayed with her the longest, the one that haunted her. Alden never spoke about his pain, physical or emotional. He kept it all inside. His journal was the only witness to his loneliness, his guilt, his aches, his longing for his late wife, and the quiet shame he felt over his growing weakness. Mary read those entries with shaking hands. Miss her more than I can say, but I won't burden Mary with that. Chest hurts again, not going to tell anyone. That silence may have been the most dangerous habit of all, because pain not spoken becomes pain that grows. She wept, as she realized he had suffered in silence so she wouldn't worry. He had protected her from his truth. And in doing so, he carried that burden into his final sleep. Mary knew she couldn't go back and change his choices, but she could change hers. Now every night before she turns off the light, she speaks out loud. I heard here. I'm grateful for this. I miss you. I'm scared today, but I'm okay. She talks to her father, to herself, to the night, because nothing should be buried in silence, not even sorrow, and certainly not love. Mary once believed that grief would pass like a storm, that one day the sun would return and everything would feel normal again. But grief doesn't pass. It reshapes you. It teaches you to live more gently, more intentionally, to listen harder, to notice the details. And as Mary adjusted to her father's absence, she found herself becoming more aware of her own body, her habits, and her bedtime rituals. Every night she asked herself the question her father never did. Am I preparing my body for peace, or setting it up for pain? That question guided her through the rest of what she uncovered, truths hidden in routines that too many seniors overlook. The fourth dangerous habit she realized her father had kept was this. He went to bed with unresolved worry night after night, worry about money, about the past, about the bills on the table and the creaks in the roof. He'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, replaying old regrets, second-guessing conversations, wondering what might have been if he'd done just one thing differently. His journal was full of confessions. Can't stop thinking about that loan I never paid back. Still hear the argument we had before she died. Mary deserves better than me. These thoughts would churn inside him, unspoken, unresolved, night after night. What Mary didn't know then, but learned later, was how powerful stress can be, especially for aging hearts. When you go to bed carrying mental and emotional tension, your nervous system stays alert. Your heart beats faster, your breathing shallows. Your body becomes a battlefield, right when it should be healing. And so, every night, Alden's body fought against itself. In silence. Mary's heart ached when she read that, because she remembered the phone calls she didn't answer, the moments she rushed their conversations, the day she told him, "Dad, don't worry so much. It's not healthy." But he couldn't help it. He just didn't know how to let it go, and he didn't know he could. So Mary decided to break the cycle. Now, every evening before she sleeps, she writes down her worries, on paper, not in her head. She writes, "Today, I'm carrying this, but I release it for now. Tomorrow will come. Tonight I rest." Sometimes she adds a prayer, sometimes just a breath. But every night she clears the space, because a cluttered mind is as dangerous as a cluttered heart. And sleep is not the time for battles, it's the time for surrender. She also began practicing something her father never dared to try: forgiveness, not just of others, but of herself. Because many seniors lie awake reliving the moments they wish they could change, the things they didn't say, the dreams they abandoned, the apologies they never made. Alden did that. A lot. And it chipped away at him, quietly. Even more than the chest pain. So Mary began whispering forgiveness into her own pillow. I forgive myself for what I didn't know then. I forgive the people who couldn't love me the way I needed. I forgive my body for aging, for hurting, for changing. And little by little her nights softened. The ache in her chest lifted. Her rest became deeper. And then came the unexpected transformation. She began sharing what she'd learned. Not with lectures or bullet points, but with stories. Gentle ones like her father would have told at the kitchen table. She visited the local senior center and began a nightly wisdom circle. Just a few chairs, a soft lamp, and voices full of history and heartache. There she listened to a man named George who hadn't slept through the night since his wife died 5 years ago. She met Clara, who hadn't eaten before 9 p.m. in decades, because it was the only quiet time in her house. And sweet Evelyn, who kept a television on in every room because the silence reminded her too much of her childhood. They all carried pain in different forms, but in that small circle, something changed. They began walking together before sunset. They shared light meals, soups made from recipes passed down generations. They turned off the TV an hour before bed and read to each other instead. And most importantly, they talked about their worries, their regrets, their hopes, their fears, of what the night might bring, and the strength it took to face it anyway. Mary saw it happen week by week. Eyes grew clearer. Laughter returned. And slowly, gently, sleep came easier. Not because the body was fixed overnight, but because the soul was no longer holding everything in alone. That, she realized, was the greatest bedtime ritual of all. Connection. The simple act of being seen, being heard, and being cared for, especially as the day ends. Alden had not had that, not in his final months. He had chosen solitude. And while there was dignity in his quiet strength, there was also isolation. Mary made peace with that, but she vowed to never let someone else go to sleep feeling unseen. So now, every night before she turns off her light, she calls someone, a friend, a neighbor, a cousin, just to say, "I'm thinking of you. Sleep peacefully tonight. You're not alone." And every night she feels her father's presence in those calls, because his story, though it ended with silence, began a movement of healing, and his final sleep became a guidepost for better rest, for others. The seasons changed slowly that year. Summer faded into a soft golden autumn, and Mary found herself walking the same trail her father once enjoyed in his younger days. The trees whispered in the wind, and the sun, low and gentle, touched her shoulders like an old friend. Each step felt like a conversation with the past, a quiet acknowledgement of the man who had once walked this path alone, but she was not alone. In her heart, she carried him. In her footsteps, she honored him. And in her nightly rituals, she gave life to the lessons his absence had left behind. People at the senior center began calling her the Evening Light, a gentle name for someone who brought calm to the close of day. But Mary knew the truth. She was simply continuing what her father had unknowingly started. Because his death, though painful, became a beginning, a chance to awaken others, a reason to reflect on the small things, the bedtime choices that whisper louder than we think. She began sharing the 4 habits everywhere she went. Not with fear, but with love. Eat earlier, let your body rest with ease. Turn off the screens, let the night be quiet. Move, even a little. Remind your body it's still alive. And speak your truth, because silence can be the heaviest weight of all. At first, some resisted. "I've done this my whole life," they said. But over time, stories began to echo back to her. "I slept better last night than I have in months. I didn't know how much my TV was keeping me awake until I turned it off. I told my son I missed him and we talked for an hour. It was working. Not because it was medicine, but because it was care, because it was intention, because it was love, translated into action." One evening, Mary sat down with her own grandchildren, a plate of cut fruit between them and the sky outside, turning dusky pink. "Grandma," her youngest asked, "do you ever get scared at night?" Mary smiled, tracing the rim of her teacup. "I used to," she said, "because I thought night meant endings, but now I see it as a promise." "A promise of what?" the child asked, leaning in. "Of rest," she whispered. "Of healing, of being forgiven by the day." The child nodded slowly, not fully understanding but feeling something sacred in the moment. And as the stars began to peek through the sky, Mary felt peace settle in her bones. Not because everything was perfect, not because she was never tired or aching, but because she had learned that the way we end our day is how we begin to shape our tomorrow, and that wisdom, passed down gently, becomes a light that lives far beyond us. She wrote one last entry in the back of her father's journal. His, handwriting fading, hers steady. "You taught me even in your silence. I hear you now, and I promise others will too." That night she lit a candle. She sipped her tea. She stretched her arms, whispered her thanks, and forgave the day. Then, with a deep breath, she lay down and slept, not just in body, but in spirit, wrapped in the quiet grace of a life lived with care and a night embraced with peace. If this story moved you, share it with someone you care about.